Let's talk about debit cards and what your bank isn't telling you. Hi, I'm Dave Lopez.
And I'm Chase Lopez, and we're investment advisor representatives with ILG Financial. And this is another episode of Retire Your Way with ILG Financial, where we talk all things retirement planning. Dave, it's a little bit of a different topic than we normally talk about today.
A different one.
But to your opening, debit cards, the pros and the cons of debit cards. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. And really, debit cards have grown in prevalence over the last 20 years, right? As we've moved from a society that uses a lot of cash to a lot of virtually no cash now.
Yeah,
right?
we're virtually cashless.
Yeah, virtually cashless. Debit cards have exploded in prevalence. So where we're going to start is some pros and some cons on those debit cards themselves. So what are some pros of using a debit card?
Yeah, a couple advantages to debit cards that people may like. One of them would be that it helps you with your budget a little bit, right? Because you can't run up debt like you could with a credit card, right? So you can only allow to take out as much as is in the account before the debit card stops working.
Right.
The exception to that would be if you have overdraft protection, which might be to your detriment, right?
Yeah.
Because it would maybe they bill you for it and the fee and who knows what else.
Right.
But for all intents and purposes, that's a huge advantage. If you're trying to manage your budget, you don't want to overspend, a debit card would be a good way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also with debit cards, right? Sometimes, depending on what you're buying and the size of the purchase, it can actually be a little bit cheaper to use a debit card as opposed to a credit card, right? So with a credit card, the credit card company actually charges the merchant a fee for them to take the payment. So if you're using a debit card, sometimes that merchant will give you a break because the merchant's giving you a break, right?
Yeah, now I will say most of the time that's not the case.
Correct.
Right. If you go to the grocery store, the bill's the bill.
Right.
What happens is if you use the debit card, the grocery store just gets to keep that fee because they're not having to pay anybody the fee.
Right.
Whereas if they use a credit card, the grocery store ends up getting maybe, for example, 1% less on the groceries because they've got to pay Visa or MasterCard the 1%.
Right.
But on a big purchase, if you were trying to buy a car or something,
Yeah, a car's a great one.
right? They might say, look, if you're going to use your credit card to swipe it to buy a car, it's going to cost us more. We're not giving up 1% of the price of the car to Visa.
Right.
And so just be aware of that if you're using a credit card.
Right.
See if you can get a cheaper deal by pulling your debit card out.
Right.
But that would be an advantage for debit cards.
Right.
Okay?
So the last kind of small advantage for the debit card is obviously if you needed cash, right, you can take cash out of your ATM, right, and get that cash readily available by using the debit card. There are some disadvantages to having a debit card or using a debit card, right? And the first one kind of goes to security, right? Protecting yourself from fraud. And there's really, kind of take a sidetrack here, there's really two big ways that, your debit card could get compromised as far as fraud goes. So the first is phishing, right? And that's PH as opposed to starting with an F. Phishing is one of the biggest ways that folks, their debit cards are compromised. And phishing, what that basically means is you receive a text or you receive an email link from a person that is basically trying to impersonate your debit card company
Or anybody.
Right? Yeah,
They
that's
could
a
be
good point.
impersonating the government. They can be impersonating Microsoft.
Right. Very true. Yeah. So what ends up happening is you think it's Microsoft or you think it's the IRS, right? That's a big one too. And you put in your debit card information, and now the bad actor has your debit card information.
Or just as bad, right? And this is really important. That was the older phishings, right? They had to convince you to put in your information. Now you just click the link, and it might set off a program in your phone where they can now monitor your phone and have access to all your apps on your phone. So if you've got your password to your bank account saved, they can get to it. So what's how do we fix that? Let's start there before we panic. How do we fix that problem?
Well, the first thing is if you get any links, right, in your email or via text, and you don't know or you're unsure why that link is being sent to you, or you're not sure who sent it to you, don't click it, right? That's the biggest thing, is don't click the link. Also, if you get a phone call and someone is trying to tell you, hey, they're trying to rush you on the phone and say, hey, I need your bank account information. This is the IRS. I need your bank account information or something like that. Don't give that up over the phone, right? That's another common way that these bad actors can try to extract that information.
Yeah. By the way, this is true whether you use a debit card or not, or a
Exactly.
credit card or not.
Right. Right.
This rule is do not click anything if you're not completely sure who sent it.
Right.
Just don't.
Right.
Don't open an email if you're not sure who sent it.
Right.
Right. Don't. If a phone call, no one should be asking for your PIN number, your account number, your personal information. No one should. Your bank knows that information.
Right.
So that's a rule no matter if we're doing debit cards or credit cards or anything.
Right.
Right. Direct banking. We'll talk about why a debit card exposes you more in just a minute.
Yep.
The second one, do you mind if I do the second one?
No, go for it.
So phishing was the first one. The next one is called skimming.
Skimming.
Thank you.
Yes. Skimming.
So skimming is, you may have heard of this, that's when they change the hardware that you use to put your card in, whether it's a credit card or debit card. So they'll put a phony cover on, imagine at the gas station where you put your credit card in, and it actually saves the data. And then the criminal comes back later in the middle of the night and he pulls the cover off, and he's got all the data for anyone who went through that machine.
Right.
Okay, you can do that at a store. If you put something in and someone's put a phony thing on it, it's very easy to do. They've gotten very good at it. Criminals get very good at that stuff. How do we protect against skimming? If you're going to put your stuff in something that doesn't have an employee doing it for you, right, look very closely at the apparatus where you're putting it. You're looking for any tampering or anything that looks a little off. On gas stations, they literally have tape across that actually validates this has not been tampered with. If that looks like it's been tampered with, don't use it, right? In fact, to be safest at a gas station, I would go in and just pay at the register, right? It's going to just limit your chances because skimming is on the rise, credit cards or debit cards. Now, the reason we tell you this, Chase, walk into why are we more exposed in a debit card than a credit card?
Right. So, and this ties back to the kind of the start of the conversation, right? One of the cons or disadvantages, I would say, of the debit card is remember what a debit card is, right? It's linked directly to your bank account, right? So when you use the card, you'll see on your bank statement, spent $50, your account balance goes down by $50. It's a withdrawal, right? So the challenge there is if you fall victim to the phishing, the skimming, or really any other way that your debit card or your bank account is compromised, the bad actor is literally taking the money out of your account, right? And they're sending it to wherever their account is. And it's much more difficult for the bank to then retrieve those funds because once the money comes out, now it goes to some other bank account that they can't get the money back. And really it will be, the bank will open up an investigation, right? And depending on how long it takes you to alert the bank of this, you could be, if you wait too long, right? I think it's over 60 days, right? If you wait over 60 days to report it, you could be on the hook for that entire transaction.
Yeah, it's different with every bank, right? But on general, if you get to the bank within 2 days or less, you're on the hook for 50. If it's over 2 days, you're on the hook for maybe as much as 500. And if it's over 60 days, you could be on the hook for all of it. But here's the scariest part. If they find that you gave up your PIN, no matter if it's phishing, skimming, phone call, or whatever, you could be on the hook for all of it. You've basically given them your access information, and they're going to say, that's not our problem. That's your problem. You're supposed to keep that private. Now, contrast that to a credit card. They're not stealing your money now. They're stealing Visa's money. Very easy for the Visa to just eat that. And they usually say, if you notify us, you're on the hook for maybe $50, right? They're not really giving up a PIN number or anything like that. So in general, a credit card loss is easier to get taken care of because they're not pulling anything out of your account.
Yeah, exactly. Remember what a credit card is, right? It's really an IOU. You put you swipe your credit card for the gas, right? Well, you aren't paying for the gas right when you swipe the credit card. You're paying for the gas once you pay your credit card bill at the end of the month, right? So in that interim, if your credit card is compromised, it is just an IOU to that company. So it's A, in their best interest, right, to get that resolved. And B, again, it's not actual money coming out of your bank account.
So to wrap it up, for safety's sake, we prefer credit cards to debit cards.
Yep.
If you need to manage your budget, we prefer debit cards, but you're taking on the safety risk.
Right.
Right. If you can't control yourself with your credit card and you're going to run up a whole lot of debt like Chase does, then you probably want to use, that's not true. You probably want to use a debit card to avoid running up debt with credit card. But again, you're exposing yourself to more risk.
Yeah. And if you're using that debit card, remember, never give the PIN to anyone, literally anyone, right? Your PIN is yours. Don't give your PIN to anyone, and just be very diligent about diligent and vigilant, right? About looking at your bank statement and making sure you recognize all of the transactions there. And then also don't click on those links. Don't answer don't give any information over any specific phone calls or anything like that.
Yeah. Hope that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again for joining us. And we'll see you soon.